we'll just do this direction. All right. So this week we are talking about David Hockney, Bridget Riley, and Salvador Dali. So we're going to be reviewing again. I'm just going to mention because for those working asynchronously who'll watch independently, you can take your DBA this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. These DBAs cannot be made up after Friday. The window closes. You can come between 10:30 and 12. Today, Monday. Tomorrow, Tuesday. You can come on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 10:30 to 12. On Wednesday and Thursday, you can also come between the hours of 9 and 10:30, our regularly scheduled time. All right, let me. All right, I'm going to actually turn my video off because I think it'll mess up the audio if I leave it on. Okay. So the first artist we're going to talk about is going to be David Hockney. David Hockney was that English painter and born in 1937. The only reason I really want you to kind of understand a little bit about when he was born, we're going to understand that he worked primarily in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Those were the times when he was most predominant. That's going to be the same sort of time period also for Bridget Riley. He attended Bradford School of Art, continued to attend the Royal College in London, where he graduated. He's known for those colorful landscapes, but also those collage-like photographs, those collages made with photographs. He was inspired by those cubists, and we're going to take a look at sort of how he compares to some of the cubists that were working at the time. He created these photo collages where he would take works, lots of different photographs, and create one single work out of these by collaging them together and creating an image that was representational of lots of different elements of the thing he was seeing or trying to create. When we look at how he compares and how he's responding to cubism and how the two relate, we're looking here at two different cubist works on either side of a hockney piece. And you can see the cubists were sort of dissecting things, breaking things into pieces. And they were looking at an object from multiple sides, and they were creating these little divisions within their work that kind of focus on different elements of that image. And David Hockney was doing the same sort of thing. With each photograph, if you look at his shoes, one single photograph of him sitting in that chair wouldn't focus on the different elements of the laces. So, for instance, or the way his hands are held, you can see there's emphasis placed on those hands as he's kind of zoomed in on them. So he's using a camera to sort of recreate what those cubists were doing with their oil paint. His work begins to change. We look at the evolution of lots of different artists and how they started one sort of genre and end up in another. And David really kind of had this very fluid transition. He takes this idea of these collage photographs. He goes to the Grand Canyon, and he's just overwhelmed by the imagery. He sees lots of different things, too much detail to capture in a single image. And just like he used to do with his photo collages, he takes lots of different pictures, and like before, he assembles them into a large work. But he didn't stop there. With this piece, he then pushes that beyond and starts to create this painting. And he starts to look at how he can create these works that use these not necessarily arbitrary, but definitely abstracted color. We see the mountains here on the right of those pinks and sort of purpley pinks, bright oranges, bright yellows. Obviously not directly representational of the Grand Canyon itself. And so he takes that to a different realm and stops necessarily looking at the collaging first, and he starts pushing the idea of this abstracted color, this bold use of these bright colors. We see him also making strong use of line. We see in the top left image those diagonal lines, those vertical lines, those horizontal lines that are all creating that movement. In the top right, we see that path, that little walkway that kind of bends around to the left and goes to the home. Those using those lines and that pattern to create that movement. Same thing on the bottom right. We see those roads that kind of wind back through those mountains that create that movement with line. And then that bottom left is probably the most uh, representative example of David's work. He's created these verticals with these blue trees and created movement with these yellow sort of French fry looking elements right there that he's painting on. And it's, again, he's still using that abstracted color, the purples, the blues, and so forth. These again use show that demonstration of that use of vertical line, that idea that he's kind of reaching up with these trees. He's kind of got, particularly in these, the left one and the one on the bottom, you see that strong vertical, from the trees, but we've got that horizontal that's created by the horizon line itself. So what should you know about David? Well, he was an English painter, born in 1937. You should know he's most common, are most known for those Cubist-inspired photo collages and those large, colorful paintings. You should also recognize that he used abstract color and emphasized line in his works. The next artist we're going to talk about is, if it'll go on, Bridget Riley. She was an op artist, and when we look at op artists, we're looking at those artists that created those cool optical illusions. Also born in England, she's one of those English painters. She was born in 1931, and because her and Hockney sort of have this parallel, upbringing, if you will. They're both born in England, both kind of responded differently to what the art they saw going around them was. And they both did it in very unique and sort of new ways. What we should recognize about Bridget Riley is she was one of the foremost op artists. She was one of these who became almost exclusively working in that op art, versus a lot of these artists who were kind of testing out all kinds of different genres of art. She was pretty well locked into what she liked to do. So op art, what is it? It's that art that tricks the mind, tricks the brain. We all often say it tricks our eyes, but our eyes really just, that little vehicle from which our brains view things. And so you're tricking the brain. You're trying to get the brain to think that there's movement going when there's not really movement going. You're trying to get the brain to think that there's depth where there's not really depth. And so she was a master at this, creating these optical illusions. One of the things we want to take a look at and remember about Bridget Riley was that process that she used to create her work. First of all, she didn't use a lot of tools. She didn't use a lot of measuring tools. She didn't use even tape off things and grid off things. She did everything by hand, but she did keep meticulous notes when she mixed color, when she created particular arches and arcs, I should say, in her work. She would make note of exactly what she created and how she created it. So if she wanted to come back and recreate something that she thought was successful, she would know exactly how she did that. So we're going to look at how she is one of these process artists that use several different steps or stages in the creation of her work. She creates these drawings that she then develops into what we call gouache paintings. So gouache is an opaque watercolor, essentially. And if you'll remember, Bridget Riley, much like Andy Warhol, was a graphic designer before she became a fine artist. And she has that background where she's used to using those materials and tools of the graphic designer, gouache being one of the most paramount and most used media for graphic designers. You could create an opaque color like you would with acrylic, but if you made a mistake, you could kind of add water and pull it back out a little bit like you do with watercolor. So it had sort of the best of both worlds. So she would create these large paintings and do them in gouache, but she wouldn't stop there. She would take that gouache surface and then she would add acrylic over that. Then once she got the acrylic the way she wanted it, she would add a layer of oil paint over the top of that. And again, understanding that that is a very sort of tried and true process, but not one that most artists tend to go through any longer. A lot of artists go for the direct approach where they start painting directly on the canvas. She was what we call one of those process painters. Had a lot of different steps and stages in her work. And again, remember, she's creating all these perfect little plus signs, these little curves that are all parallel to one another, using no tools, doing everything freehand. So what should you know about Bridget Riley for your DBA? Well, she was born in 1931, primarily worked in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. She was one of the leading op artists. Op art is art that seeks to trick the brain and create an optical illusion. She did not use those tools. She did everything by hand and creating that precision in her art. Last but not least is that crazy guy Salvador Dali, and I don't use that term crazy very lightly with this man. Salvador Dali was an individual who really thought outside the box, threw the box away. He was born in 1904. It's important to understand that a lot of what we see from Bridget Riley, from David Hockney, from artists that worked came after Salvador Dali, is once art had been expanded and opened up, if you will, in the ways that Salvador Dali opened it up, it allowed a lot of those artists to go into those different directions and explore some avenues that may have been too avant-garde, too new, or too strange for people had it not been for the path carved by Salvador Dali. So born in 1904, he had parents that believed in reincarnation, and that reincarnation, you may remember, kind of directed a lot of how he felt about himself. He thought he was the reincarnation of his brother who had died, and so that sort of set this stage for the way he would sort of look at the complexities and the diversity of understanding of how life is. And so he really had some very strange concepts, and he expressed those through his art. All right. He did experiment with realism and cubism before he started creating the surrealistic movement. And when we talk about surrealism, we're looking at a form of art that sort of responded to what we call the Dadaist or the Dadaism. And Dadaism was a form of art that was in a brief period of time, sort of between World War I, World War II, where artists were, particularly in Europe, were expressing their displeasure with the war going on in Europe. And they did so with these strange sort of collages that had some really weird things kind of going on. But it was really just the opening the door. Dali took a look at what they did, and it's like, oh man, well, let's go crazy with this. And that's kind of what he did. He takes these ideas of automatism, and automatism wasn't unique. If you ever saw the movie, what's the movie with the automaton? I can't remember. Its name's a single word. Oh, in any event, automatons were these little mechanical robots, if you will, that were made to write out poetry or draw something. And they were very complex. They worked sort of like a large clock in the way that their gears moved, and they provided that movement. The idea being, though, during the time was that there was this automatic thing going on within machinery, including mankind and our brains, that there was something automatic going on, something mechanical happening almost within our brains that if you kind of captured, you could do something very unique with. And that's what they sought to do. They started writing their thoughts down in the stream of consciousness, and then all those crazy thoughts they had, they translated into these surrealistic unique paintings. And when we look at what's unique about surrealism, or what makes surrealism, displacement, abstraction, when we look at displacement, we're talking about things that are not where they're supposed to be. If you look at the image that has the chessboard with the ocean washing up on it, well, of course, you wouldn't find chess pieces in a chessboard going into the ocean like a beach. That's that idea of displacement. We look at how he abstracted and used anamorphic types of creatures. If you look at the image sort of in the top left there, almost in the middle, you'll see there's this weird horse thing looking kind of thing, and the legs are really strong, I mean, long and elongated, and kind of strange the way that they are abstracted. We look at how they have these dreamlike qualities, and those dreamlike qualities were part of that, capturing the subconscious by writing through that stream of conscious writing. Kind of capturing what was going on in the subconscious, and expressing what we might find that going on in our dreams and so forth. Very often he created these unique landscapes. That was one of the things he's most known for, these really strange landscapes. And although he included lots of strange and weird things that looks like they didn't belong together, he often created a lot of unity in his work through his use of color, use of texture, use of line. If we look particularly at the piece on the right, you look at how he's using texture, all of those different wings that create the tree. Each has a unique and different sort of look, but the textures on them are very similar. The use of color is very similar. The same on the left, we see, even though he's using warm colors and some cool colors, the use of warm colors is fairly consistent. Nothing is extremely bright, extremely dull. It's all sort of that middle tone, if you will. But he's creating unity by keeping the consistent use of those materials. Using animals, abstracting animals was a big part. We see that sort of anamorphic use of elements here on the right with those sort of giraffe-like creatures. If you look in the middle, the bottom, we got the displacement. Those butterflies are sort of being used as the sails for that boat. And of course, that weird owl made with the upside down butterfly, and he's got an arm and a hand. So abstracting those animals is a big part of surrealism for Dali. Last but not least, Dali worked with Disney, and this is going to be your attendance question today. Dali worked with Disney to make Destino. Destino was one disturbed film. We looked at a few seconds of it, and even a few seconds we looked at were hard to watch. They're just really strange. I don't recommend you go watch the whole thing. It's just really mind-bending. But it's important to understand that Disney was the most mainstream artist at the time, and to this day, there's not much more mainstream than Disney. And so, but Disney had a very mature artistic side to his work as well, and he was a fine artist in addition to being an animator. And so working with other artists was one of the things that he took a little pride in, and particularly his work with Dali, because Dali was one of the most serious artists working at the time. Disney recognized that, and the collaboration they created was something unique, and will not be forgotten. And sometimes, unfortunately, some things are hard to unsee. So what should you know about Dali for the DBA? Well, Dali was the most famous and most important surrealist in the surreal movement. He was known for his use of abstracted animals, unusual environments, and displacement, putting those things where they don't belong. And he worked with Walt Disney to make Destino a surreal animated movie that will creep you out if you watch the whole thing. All right, that's all you need to know for your DBA. If you have any questions or comments, I will take them now. You can put them in the chat. I'm going to stop recording the lesson. For those working asynchronously, don't forget your attendance answer is Disney is who Dali worked with to create Destino. Okay.